The Western Philosophy by Durant, Chapter 9, Section 4, The Song of Zarathustra. And now, from art, which seemed to have failed him, he took refuge in science, whose cold Apollonian air cleansed his soul after the Dionysian heat and riot of Tribecan and Bayreuth, and in philosophy which offers an asylum where no tyranny can penetrate. Like Spinoza, he tried to calm his passions by examining them. We need, he said, a chemistry of the emotions, and so in his next book, Human or Too Human, 1878 to 80, he became psychologist and analyzed with a surgeon's ruthlessness the tenderest feelings and the most cherished beliefs, dedicating it all bravely in the midst of reaction to the scandalous Voltaire. He sent the volumes to Wagner and received in return the book of Parsifal. They never communicated again. And then, at the very prime of life, in 1879, he broke down physically and mentally and sank into the vicinity of death. He prepared for the end defiantly. Promise me, he said to his sister, that when I die only my friends shall stand about my coffin, and no inquisitive crowd. See that no priest or anyone else utter falsehoods at my graveside. When I can no longer protect myself, and let me descend into my tomb as an honest pagan. But he recovered, and this heroic funeral had to be postponed. Out of such illness came his love of health and the sun, of life and laughter and dance and Carmen's music of the South. Out of it, too came a stronger will, born of fighting death, a yes saying that filled life's sweetness even in its bitterness and pain, and out of it, perhaps, a pitiful effort to rise to Spinoza's cheerful acceptance of natural limitations and human destiny. My formula for greatness is armor fati, not only to bear up under every necessity, but to love it. Alas, it is more easily said than done. The titles of his next books, The Dawn of Day, 1881, and The Joyful Wisdom, 1882, reflect a grateful convalescence. Here is a kindlier tone and a gentler tongue than in the later books. Now he had a year of quiet days, living modestly on the pension his university had given him. The proud philosopher could even thaw into a pretty frailty and find himself suddenly in love. But lo, Salome did not return his love. His eyes were too sharp and deep for comfort. Paul was less dangerous and played Dr. Pagelow to Nietzsche's Die Musik. Nietzsche fled in despair, composing aphorisms against the women as he went. In truth, he was naive, enthusiastic, romantic, tender to simplicity. His war against tenderness was an attempt to exorcise a virtue which had led to a bitter deception and to a wound that never healed. He could not find solitude enough now. It is difficult to live with men because silence is difficult. He passed from Italy to the heights of the Alps. At Sils Maria in the upper Engadine, loving not man nor woman neither, and praying that man might be surpassed. And there on the lonely heights came the inspiration of his greatest book. I sat there waiting for nothing, enjoying it beyond good and evil now, the light now the shade. There was only the day, the lake, the noon time without end. Then, my friend, suddenly one became two, and Zarathustra passed by me. Now his soul rose and overflowed at its margins. He had found a new teacher, Zoroaster, a new God, the Superman, and a new religion, eternal recurrence. He must sing now. Philosophy mounted into poetry under the ardor of his inspiration. I could sing a song and will sing it, although I am alone in an empty house and must sing it into mine own ears. What loneliness is in that phrase! Thou great star, what would be thy happiness were it not for those for whom thou shinest? Lo, I am weary of my wisdom, like the bee that hath collected too much honey. I need hands reaching out for it. So he wrote, Thus spake Zarathustra, 1883, and finished it in that hallowed hour when Richard Wagner gave up the ghost in Venice. It was his magnificent answer to Parsifal, but the maker of Parsifal was dead. It was his masterpiece, and he knew it. This work stands alone. He wrote of it later. Do not let us mention the poets in the same breath. Nothing, perhaps, had ever been produced out of such a superabundance of strength. If all the spirit and goodness of every great soul were collected together, the whole could not create a single one of Zarathustra's discourses. A slight exaggeration. but assuredly it is one of the great books of the 19th century. Yet Nietzsche had a bitter time getting it into print. The first part was delayed because the publishers' presses were busy with an order for 500,000 hymn books, and then by a stream of anti Semitic pamphlets. And the publisher refused to print the last part at all, as quite worthless from the point of view of shekels, so that the author had to pay for its publication himself. 40 copies of the book were sold, 7 were given away. One acknowledged it, no one praised it. Never was a man so much alone. Zarathustra, aged 30, comes down from his meditative mountain to preach to the crowd. Like his Persian prototype Zoroaster, but the crowd turns from him to see a rope walker perform. The rope walker falls and dies. Zarathustra takes him upon his shoulders and carries him away, because thou hast made danger thy calling. Therefore shall I bury thee with my own hands. Live dangerously, he preaches. Erect your cities beside Vesuvius. Send out your ships to unexplored seas. Live in a state of war. And remember to disbelieve. Zarathustra, coming down from the mountain, meets an old hermit who talks to him about God. But when Zarathustra was alone, he spake thus with his heart: Can it actually be possible? This old saint in his forest hath not yet heard aught of God being dead. But of course God was dead, or the gods were dead. For the old gods came to an end long ago, and verily it was a good and a joyful end of gods. They did not die lingering in the twilight, although that lie is told. On the contrary, they once upon a time laughed themselves unto death. That came to pass when, by a God himself, the most ungodly word was uttered, the word, There is but one God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. And the old grim beard of a god, a jealous one, forgot himself thus. And then all gods laughed and shook on their chairs and cried, Is godliness not just that there are gods, but no God? Whoever hath ears, let him hear. Thus spake Zarathustra. What hilarious atheism! is not just this godliness, that there are no gods. What could be created if there were gods? If there were gods, how could I bear to be no God? Consequently, there are no gods. Who is more ungodly than I, that I may enjoy his teachings? I conjure you, my brethren, remain faithful to earth, and do not believe those who speak unto you of superterrestrial hopes. Poisonous they are, whether they know it or not. Many an erstwhile rebel returns to this sweet poison at last, as a necessary anesthesia for life. The higher men gathered in Zarathustra's cave to prepare themselves to preach his doctrine. He leaves them for a while and returns to find them offering incense to a donkey who has created the world in his own image, example, as stupid as possible. This is not edifying, but then, says our text, he who must be a creator in good and evil, verily, he must first be a destroyer and break values into pieces. Thus, the highest evil is part of the highest goodness, but that is creative goodness. Let us speak thereon, ye wisest man. However had it be, to be silent is worse, or unuttered truths become poisonous. And whatever will break on our truths, let it break. Many a house hath yet to be built. Thus spake Zarathustra. In this irreverent, but Zarathustra complains that nobody knows any longer how to revere, and he calls himself the most pious of all those who believe not in God. He longs for belief and pities all who, like myself, suffer from the great loathing, for whom the old God died and no new God yet lieth in cradles and napkins, and then he pronounces the name of the new God. That are all gods. Now we will that Superman live. I teach you, Superman, man is a something that shall be surpassed. What have ye done to surpass him? What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. What can be loved in man is that he is a transition and a destruction. I love those who do not know how to live except in perishing, for they are those going beyond. I love the great despisers because they are the great adorers. They are arrows of longing for the other shore. I love those who do not seek beyond the stars for a reason to perish and be sacrificed. but who sacrifice themselves to earth in order that earth may someday become Superman's. It is time for man to mark his goal. It is time for man to plant the germ of his highest hope. Tell me, my brethren, if the goal be lacking to humanity, is not humanity itself lacking? Love unto the most remote man in higher than love unto your neighbor. Nietzsche appears to foresee that every reader will think himself the Superman, and tries to guard against this by confessing that the Superman is not yet born. We can only be his forerunners, and his soil will nothing beyond your capacity. Be not virtuous beyond your ability, and demand nothing of yourselves contrary to probability. Not for us is the happiness which only the Superman will know. Our best goal is work. For a long time I ceased not to strive for my happiness. Now I strive for my work. Nietzsche is not content with having created God in his own image. He must make himself immortal. After the Superman comes eternal recurrence. All things will return in precise detail and an infinite number of times. Even Nietzsche will return, and this Germany of blood and iron and sackcloth and ashes, and all the travail of the human mind, from ignorance to Zarathustra. It is a terrible doctrine, the last and the most courageous form of yes saying and the acceptance of life. And yet, how could it not be? The possible combination of reality are limited, and the time is endless. Some day, inevitably, life and matter will fall into just such a form as they once had. And out of that fatal repetition, all history must unwind its devious course again. To such a past determinism brings us. No wonder Zarathustra feared to speak this, his last lesson, feared and trembled and held back until a voice spoke to him. What matter about thyself, Zarathustra? Say thy word and break in pieces. Today's work is over.